Professor Prudence Plum is a world authority in the scientific relationship between patisserie and pleasure. Her doctoral work, The Importance of Food Sovereignty in Citophilia, has led to dramatic cultural shifts in mainstream food pornography towards more ethical ingredients. Based at the Hedonistic Inquiry Research Centre at the Grellin Institute, she is currently putting the finishing touches on a much-anticipated volume on the role of macronutrients in autonomic arousal. In her non-professional life, Professor Plum is the long-reigning baking champion at her local agricultural show, a title dominated by both her mother and grandmother prior to her succession. She shares her life with her three beloved Wistarats, Muffin, Sprinkles and Cupcake. Countess Clementine Custard from the Palace X is the descendant of a long line of royal pleasure seekers. Her extensive travels to distant lands in pursuit of exquisite sensory experiences has made her a world authority on hedonism. The Countess' seminal work on sensory pleasure and self-satisfaction, developed through non-collaborative field research, has made her the darling of Epicurean circles throughout the civilized world. When not occupied by her professional commitments, the Countess travels to the New World to pursue her passion for Latin dance and Latin dance partners. Though rarely home, she makes time to oversee the breeding program of her prized peacocks.
The word cake is derived from the old Viking word kaka, or the Dutch word kork, or the German word kuchen. Cakes were originally invented in Australia and were made 60,000 years ago, what we now know as Johnny cakes. They were used to increase the energy potential of whole grains by grinding them into the flour. So basically, Johnny cakes were the original energy bar and was useful as it could be traded or stored. It was the Greeks who thought to up the ante by adding leavening agents and sweetness in the form of honey and dried fruits. But it wasn't till the 17th century, at the height of the slave trade, that sugar became commonplace and it made its way into the recipe. This was also when icing made its first appearance.
Ah, those were the days of spectacular gâteaux.
But what has cake got to do with collaboration and learning? And why is it appropriate in the workplace? Well, it all comes down to this sentiment, and we're here to tell you why. Effective teamwork requires motivation, respect, safety and inspiration, factors that don't happen on their own. Effective facilitators use different tactics to achieve these aims. But what if they could all be achieved with one strategy? They can. It's cake. Not sold? Let's investigate this idea. First of all, motivation. Think of how we train dogs. Your emails are piling up, you've got deadlines up the wazoo, but the motivation of a sweet treat will get you up out of that uncomfy chair and down to the tea room in the blink of an eye. It's important not to exploit this trick, however. Just like a puppy, too many treats can make someone unmotivated, and it's not good for the waistline. A recent study from the University of Chester in the UK surveyed nearly 1,000 participants and found once a month is the ideal frequency for office cake. Respect. It takes one Brené Brown TED Talk to demonstrate the power of vulnerability, and nothing embodies this better than trialling a new cake recipe for your work colleagues to critique. Not only does this example of vulnerability generate respect and build relationships, if demonstrated by a superior, it also helps to dissolve power imbalances, leading to feelings of safety and belonging. This is particularly true if a superior was to personally offer a home-baked offering to a subordinate in a gesture of role reversal. The gift of cake also creates inspiration. As the French sociologist Professor Alain Colette puts it, the paradigm of the gift is not a machine for blowing solutions, it's for inspiring questions. For the more experienced cake makers amongst you, care must be taken not to intimidate collaborators with your baking prowess. The respect earned by displaying vulnerability can quickly be replaced with feelings of resentment or inferiority if your cake is too perfect. Focus your attention on the cake on the left. Its perfection is indeed beguiling and impressive, but the somewhat rustic image on the right is far more comforting and inviting. You can almost taste the sweet ache of the warm caramel as it drips down the side of the pudding. The visual aesthetics of one's cake should not eclipse its gustatory potential. Indeed, visual augmentation of a paltry product can lead to severe dissatisfaction for the customer. Beware too of the potential to repel stakeholders through group consumption. Misophonia, or hatred of sounds associated with eating, such as chewing or slurping, can quickly arrest the learning potential of the group thanks to the eating etiquette of a single stakeholder. Hedonistic pursuits isn't just some bourgeois hobby, it's the oldest trick in the evolutionary book. We are here to perpetuate our species, and that's what it's all about. And pleasure is our motivator. If procreation wasn't fun, we simply wouldn't do it. And in order to procreate successfully, we must first reach sexual maturity, and that takes adequate nutrients. Our eyes don't contain colour receptors so we can be beguiled by the sight of a daffodil. They are there so we can find the reddest berries on the bush. Likewise, our taste receptors include sweet, so we can distinguish which fruit has the most sugar, and therefore which is the most calorific. What you perceive as academic ponderings, I'm sorry to tell you, often have little to do with your frontal cortex, and are no different from those motivations experienced by my beloved rats. To explore this concept, I introduce to you the pleasure cycle. I was thinking more of the graph. Whilst pleasure can be achieved through many stimuli, be it music, fine art, dousing each other with chocolate mousse, we experience these feelings by the same neurological pathways, a common hedonic currency, if you will, and this currency is in the form of neurotransmitters. When we experience food, sensory information from receptors in our eyes, ears, nose, mouth and stomach are processed in the brain and lead to the 3 phases of the pleasure cycle: wanting, liking and learning. This information is processed by way of prior memories, expectations and emotional state, leading to an involuntary feeling of pleasure. These feelings may also be accompanied by pleasure-inducing behaviours such as licking of the lips or soft moans. The intensity of these phases is linked to multisensory information about the food to be consumed, including temperature, viscosity, texture, fat content, and pungency, which may be why a warm donut is far more enticing than a cold sausage. The wanting phase defines the motivation to acquire the reward. Liking, the tangible pleasure or hedonic impact of the reward, and learning, the associations and predictions about future rewards based on past experience. The 3 appetitive, consumptory and satiety phases are not necessarily linear, but wax and wane throughout the pleasure cycle. The wanting phase is associated with the release of dopamine and opioids in the brain and increase the subject's willingness to work for a reward, a motivational tool if ever there was one. The area of the brain triggered by feelings of wanting is far larger than those associated with liking or learning, which is probably why we devote more time to foreplay than we do to spooning, and more time to cooking than we do to cleaning up. The liking phase is associated with the release of serotonin and oxytocin. Oxytocin is associated with feelings of bonding and empathy and is released in the brain in response to activation of stretch receptors located throughout the body, including the stomach, the vagina and the nipples. Whilst tweaking a nipple or stimulating the vaginal wall may be frowned upon in an office environment, consumption of cake can be equally effective at releasing oxytocin and improving team bonding, and without the need to involve the HR department. Whilst the genitals and the nipples may be crowd pleasers, 90% of the oxytocin released in our bodies happens in the digestive tract. Mix in some opioids and things get even better. Opioids, like those found in cacao, amplify sensory pleasure and liking associated with sweetness, which is why chocolate is such a surefire way to make friends and influence people. Learning is associated with wanting, liking and satiety, and is facilitated by dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, opioids, and other neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and glutamate. As such, strong learning happens throughout the pleasure cycle, which is why you should feed your audience during a learning exercise and not after it. So with that thought, let's engage with a little learning.
Have your cake at the ready. You may be fervently feverish about fromage, but I must inform you it does not have the same effect on your physiology. It's the sweetness of cake that conjures the magic. You hear the door creak open, look up from your desk, and behold, a delightful surprise is walking towards you. Ah, 'tis cake. Parts of your brain light up with pleasure, the surprise, the gift, the anticipation of sharing that sweet offering. First feast your eyes upon its beauty. Admire the swirls of icing, the layers of cream and crumb, the glistening red cherry poised on top. All designed to titillate your eyes, the visual image promising visceral pleasures to come via the other senses. And how does it feel in your hand? Did one of your fingers slide into the cream as you picked it up, giving a hint of how it will feel in your mouth? The anticipation. It's not quite time to put it in your mouth yet, so wipe up that trickle of drool that's threatening to spoil your shirt. The dribble is in fact your mouth telling you that you're well and truly on the pleasure cycle ride. The social side is also making you feel a little warm and fuzzy. Perhaps someone else made the cake for you. That's always nice. Or maybe you made yourself a nice little treat, and then you shared your efforts with others and now they're smiling too. All those tiny gastronomical manners make us feel good, ensuring everyone has a slice, passing the cream, and of course, licking your fingers in company is quite an intimate act. And now finally, it's time to put it in your cake hole. Breathe in its aroma as it approaches your face. Taste the icing first. Go on, give it a little lick. Sweet, creamy pleasure. Now take a bite, and as you do, notice the smell, the taste, the mouthfeel. It's at this moment that everything comes together in the cake hole of sensory intensity. Chew it slowly, savouring every sensation. Ah, the joy of consummation and satiation as you swallow. And it descends to your stomach, and that warm, cakey sensation ripples through your body. Lick that last skerrick of icing from the corner of your mouth. Your brain is now in the creative zone, primed for collaboration and innovation, ready to solve the big problems, climb cerebral mountains, and meet your fellow collaborateurs with a zing. Or perhaps it's time for spooning. They say a picture tells 1,000 words, so to bid you farewell, my learned colleague has kindly swapped her lab coat for a kitchen apron. The professor has whipped up a couple of her famous sweetmeats to demonstrate how visual aesthetics can help propel our imagination into uncharted territories of creativity. And of course, pleasurable adventures are always best when shared.
Well, I don't know about you, Custard, but I've had an elegant sufficiency.
Well, I'm not surprised, my dear Buzzard. That is a lot of cake. Speaking of which, could you pass me a slice?
Here you are. But at the end of all this, what have we actually learnt?
Well, I'm not sure about you, but I've learned that when seeking pleasure, one should lower one's expectations. Cheers. Bon appétit, mes amis.